welcome again, everyone, to this evening's webinar titled Creating Communities of Welcome, sponsoring newcomers through P4CHNV. First, I would like to review some housekeeping items with everyone. Tonight's session will be recorded and held in both English and Spanish. Many thanks to Liz Torres from the Community Language Cooperative, who will be providing simultaneous interpretation in Spanish for some quick instructions on accessing the Zoom interpretation function, which will also be shared with you in the chat. I will hand it over to Liz Torres. Liz?
Hi, everyone, and welcome again. My name is Liz Torres, and I am here from Community Language Cooperative to provide interpretation for today's webinar. We will be using the Zoom interpretation function, which will be turned on once I am finished saying this in Spanish. If you're using a computer, you'll see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a tablet or phone, click on More, and you will see a menu that includes an option called Language Interpretation. To listen to the interpretation, click on the globe icon and then choose the language channel. If you are using a phone or a tablet, click Done. And if you cannot hear the interpreter on your channel, please ask for help in the Q&A. As an organization committed to language justice, we are so pleased to support this multilingual space. We will now begin simultaneous interpretation. Bienvenidos a todos al webinar de esta tarde titulado Creando Comunidades de Bienvenida, patrocinando a recién llegados a través de P4CHNV. Primero que nada, me gustaría revisar algunas cosas con todos. La sesión de esta noche será grabada y se llevará a cabo en inglés y en español. Mi nombre es Liz Torres de la Cooperativa Comunitaria del Lenguaje y proporcionaré interpretación simultánea en español. Algunas instrucciones rápidas a las que se puede referir usted en el chat. Estaremos usando la función de interpretación de Zoom que será activada cuando termine de decir esto en español. Si usted está usando una computadora, verá un icono de globo terráqueo debajo de su pantalla. Y si está en una tableta o teléfono, puede hacer clic en Más y verá el menú que incluye la opción llamada Interpretación del Lenguaje. Para escuchar la interpretación, haga clic en el icono de globo o Interpretación del Lenguaje. Después elija el canal de su lenguaje. Si está usando un teléfono o tableta, haga clic en Hecho, y si no puede escuchar al intérprete en su canal, pida ayuda en la sección de Q&A de preguntas y respuestas. Como organización comprometida a la justicia del lenguaje, es un placer apoyar este espacio multilingüe. Ahora comenzaremos con la interpretación simultánea. Gracias por su atención y oficialmente comenzaremos con nuestro webinar. We can go ahead and get interpretation turned on.
Thank you so much, Liz. With the interpretation turned on, we will move through with our program. My name is AlShadood. I am the Director of Ecosystem Partnerships at Welcome.us, and I will be helping to start tonight's webinar. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge our partners that helped us connect with more organizations and diaspora groups than we previously have. First, the Center for Democracy in the Americas, CDA, and Women's Refugee Commission, WRC. Thank you, Maria and Savitra, for advising us along the early stages of planning this webinar. The list of our partners is long, but we have many partners that have helped us disseminate the invitation to this event, which is possibly how many of you learned about it. And many thanks to you all for joining. So I'm extending our thanks to Apoyo Emigrantes Venezolanos, Cuba Study Group, Miami Freedom Project, Venezuelan American Alliance, and Venezuelans and Immigrants Aid. Thank you all for making this webinar a success. And now I'd like to pass it over to my colleague, Kit Tainter, Vice President of Policy and Practice at Welcome.us. She is our subject matter expert on pathways for newcomers. Take it away, Kit.
Thanks so much, Maytham, and hola todos. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here tonight, and thank you so much for joining. We have a lot to cover in our time together this evening. So let me go over a quick agenda so we can all know where we're going to together tonight. We'll start with a little background on Welcome.us. We're still quite a new organization, and many of you may be unfamiliar with us and what we do in the ecosystem. We'll transition into a little bit about the process for Cubans, Haitians, Venezuelans, and Nicaraguans, which you may hear me refer to from time to time as CHNV. We'll talk about the life-changing opportunity of sponsorship, and then ensure that we all know about the great resources that Welcome.us team, in collaboration with many great partners, including those that Maytham mentioned before, and including folks at state governments across the United States, developed to ensure that we all understand the possibilities that exist under sponsorship for these populations. We're going to end with an ask of all of you, and to help us share all of you have learned tonight with your neighbors, friends, and colleagues. So a quick reminder to all of us, the purpose of the webinar this evening is to share information and awareness of sponsorship in the CHNV program, in particular to those of us in the United States who are interested in or who will become interested over the course of our time together this evening in becoming sponsors. It's such a powerful act of service, very much aligned with our country's shared humanitarian values. For you overachievers and note takers, don't worry, this is being recorded. You will receive a recording of this webinar via email, as well as the PowerPoint slides. A few other housekeeping notes before we go too far into our presentation. My colleagues will be sharing the links that I'll be referring to in the PowerPoint slide in the chat function, in case you would like to peruse them during this webinar. We've also reserved time for Q&A tonight, or questions and answers. We probably won't be able to get to all of your questions, but we'll do our best. For those questions that we don't get to, we'll compile answers to all of your questions and send them out to you in the coming days, as well as update our FAQs with all of the great questions that you have for us tonight. All right. We'll also, yes, okay, great. I'd like to share a little bit more about our organization, Welcome.us. Welcome.us is built to ensure that every American who wants to be involved in acts of welcome can be. We believe that the generosity of the American people far exceeds the limited capacity to welcome newcomers fleeing persecution and violence here in the United States. And we know that when you offer an opportunity to engage with newcomers, especially through the powerful nature of sponsorship, people from all walks of life lean in. We do work in formal partnership with the United States government and alongside over 800 nonprofit organizations across the United States. From well-known organizations like Rotary Club International to local organizations such as those that support newcomers in all of the cities that you reside in across the United States. We are fortunate to have these 4 past presidents and first ladies as our honorary co-chairs, and we thank them for their commitment to a stronger nation. And now that we're done with a little bit about Welcome.us, we'll go right into the process for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. On January 5th, the Biden administration launched expanded humanitarian parole programs for individuals from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. This CHNV program allows up to 30,000 people a month a path to safety and a chance to rebuild their lives in the United States. This program is modeled after the Uniting for Ukraine program, which since May of 2022 has offered a path to safety for over 200,000 Ukrainians. These programs, Uniting for Ukraine and the process for Cuba, Nicaragua, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, are lifelines for many of those whose daily lives are threatened by war, gang violence, political instability, economic distress, and persecution. And each of these programs require the support of a US-based sponsor. At Welcome.us's website, you'll be able to find a lot more information about Uniting for Ukraine and CHNV, much more than I can talk about tonight, but let's go over some basics nonetheless. In order to be eligible to utilize this pathway, a newcomer must be outside the United States. They must possess an eligible passport valid for international travel. They must provide for their own commercial travel to an air US port of entry and final US destination. They need to undergo and pass required national security and public safety vetting and comply with all additional requirements, including vaccinations and other public health guidelines. There are additional eligibility guidelines for individuals from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. I invite you to check them out at the USCIS website, noting that they do include things such as whether or not you have had a forced departure from the United States before or previous travel towards our southern border. As we look at this slide together, I want to draw your attention to the verbiage in italics. It's named sponsorship. Do you see that at the bottom? What this means is a beneficiary from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, or Venezuela must know a person willing to sponsor them in order to avail themselves of the CHNV program. So even if you meet all of those eligibility requirements that I talked about just a minute ago, you still need to have somebody in the United States who's willing to sponsor your pathway here. Sponsors and beneficiaries together submit an I-134A application to USCIS or the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service. This application does require personal information of both the sponsor and the beneficiary, and we'll get to that in a few slides. But once approved, the beneficiary receives the authorization to travel to the United States through an airport where they will be granted humanitarian parole. Importantly, this status allows them to stay in the United States for up to 2 years and really vitally to apply to work here in the US. But before we get too into the weeds about the CHNV program, let's take a moment to talk about sponsors. Remember, sponsors are the lifeline for those fleeing Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Ukraine. And therefore, sponsors have superpowers should they choose to use them. Sponsors must hold lawful presence in the United States. So that could include US citizens and legal permanent residents. That could include folks that reside and work in the United States on DACA. That includes people who are here and have been granted temporary protected status. It includes asylees. It includes recently arrived refugees. And really, really importantly, it also includes other parolees who have come in previous years through other programs. I think it's really great to look at the large degree of the different immigration statuses that can become sponsors. And it's really important to recognize that individuals live in the United States with all different immigration statuses. And this is one program where we can all lean in and really make a difference on behalf of those seeking safety. It's also really important to note that you don't have to sponsor alone. You can sponsor as part of an organization, with a group of friends, as part of your Rotary Club, or with members of your faith community. In short, there's a place in this sponsorship program for most of us that call the United States home. As far as beneficiaries, we've talked a little bit about their eligibility, but I really like to think about beneficiaries as people first and foremost. Who could beneficiaries be? They could be journalists, they could be students, they could be professionals, they could be farmers, they could be families with young children, they could be political dissidents or other economically devastated entrepreneurs. They could be single moms. They're people who are fleeing instability, gang violence, persecution, economic distress. So they could be people just like us, living in different countries, facing challenges. And I also like to think for a moment about who could be a sponsor. I've talked about who legally can be a sponsor, but also think about who in your network could be a sponsor. Is it you? Is it one of your friends? Could it be your colleagues at work, your neighbors, folks in your faith community, people you see at the park, people you see on the bus, walking their dogs? I think what I'm trying to tell you is that sponsors could also be anyone. All of us could be a sponsor, and ultimately, all of us could have ended up in a situation like many beneficiaries have, where the political instability or economic distress in their home countries have meant that they seek a path to safety here in the United States. But before we take a much deeper dive into sponsorship and the sponsorship process, we'd like to offer you a glimpse of the sponsorship journey itself in action through Max's inspiring story in the next video.
We were watching the news when Kabul fell, and it really just broke our hearts, and we were trying to find something to do, and we felt really helpless. We heard about agencies in our community that were doing things for Afghan families. I contacted all of our neighbors in our block here, and a bunch of us just started phone treeing and emailing and texting each other, figuring out ways that we could support a family. We began to collect stuff and just get as much as we could. And this family over here got a couch, and this one over here got silverware, and we got a desk, and the things that we couldn't contribute ourselves, we went out and bought. We had a lot of volunteers and neighbors come on the day of the move-in, and it took us about 3 days to do it all. It was a whirlwind of community action, and we just did it. We sort of, pulled up our sleeves, rolled up our sleeves, and started putting all the furniture together, putting carpets down, buying food, and just really trying to be as present and as unobtrusive as possible to a family that was clearly in shock.
I helped build the chairs. I also gave them my bike. It makes me feel good to help other families and know I'm doing it for a good reason and a good cause. So it feels like I'm actually part of something very, very big.
When we finally kind of were able to settle down and hear their stories, and they showed us pictures of what their home used to look like back in Afghanistan and why this was so important to them, it really hit home of what an incredible relationship this was that we had formed between our families here in DC and a family that had been flung halfway across the world into these entirely new circumstances. And I think that to me was just the heart of it, the core of it, was how can we share this love, this sense of home, this sense of community with a family that is suffering such deep trauma.
Welcome. So powerful to see stories like that remind us again that any of us could become a sponsor, and really any of us could find ourselves in a situation in which we're fleeing for safety. And while we don't have any beneficiaries sharing their stories tonight, we did receive some of their testimonies that I'll briefly read for you. I'm going to read the third one on the screen from Maria from Venezuela. She says, sponsoring will not only change the life of the person you help, but that of the sponsor. When you help a person, you will have someone who will be grateful to you for the rest of your life, and you will be able to learn from each other. Each one of them has a story and a reason why they want to come to the United States so much. These are people who want to work, to reunite with their families, help, and do the best they can. Each one has their own mission. Anytime I hear a beneficiary testimonial or someone telling their story, there's always a couple of themes: gratitude, a desire for the same thing that everyone wants: food, shelter, safety, and an opportunity for a brighter future. So sponsoring and welcoming newcomers isn't new to our nation. You might have heard of sponsorship before. Many Americans have already done it alongside their communities. What's happened over the past couple of months, and indeed the last year, is the opportunities for sponsorship has greatly expanded. We'd like to welcome newcomers through sponsorship in particular, because this process supports our newest neighbors by giving them the resources that they need to make them feel home in their new communities. So not only is a sponsor a lifeline, providing a safe passage for someone to come to the United States through that I-134 application that I briefly mentioned before, but a sponsor can also help a newcomer find their footing in their new community in the United States. Sponsors can do a whole host of things, but that might include welcoming newcomers at the airport as soon as they arrive. You could assist with securing housing, whether that is in your home on a temporary basis or in an apartment near public transportation. We make sure, sponsors can make sure that new homes have the necessary items for an individual and family to live in. Is it safe? Is it secure? Is it comfortable? Sponsors can also help secure food and clothing and other items. Many newcomers to the United States leave their home countries with very little, potentially having sold all of their personal belongings to find their path here to the United States. It's really key that we're able to give folks a backpack, let's say, to help them with the first day of school, or maybe ensure that there's enough supplies in the kitchen for them to cook meals that remind them of home. You know, sponsors can help enroll kids in school, and importantly, help the adults to secure jobs, navigate what is our very complicated healthcare system, and make sure that they enroll in public benefits and services meant to help them start on the path to integration. We know that sponsors offer newcomers what we all look for when we enter a new community. We all need help building a new life, whether that is teaching us where the best park is in our city, how to ride public transportation, or maybe just helping build friendships or join sports teams. We know that sponsors are experts in their community and have the tools that they need to make sponsorships both successful for themselves and the newcomers. Sponsorship can be a big commitment, but remember, it's also a superpower. And with that, I'm really honored to introduce James, who is sponsoring a beneficiary from Venezuela. He was matched with a beneficiary through a direct hand matching program prior to the expansion of our ability to offer sponsor and beneficiary matching or connection on our Welcome Connect platform. James is going to take a moment with us, and thanks so much, James, for joining to talk about his sponsorship journey and how anyone can be a sponsor just like him. And congratulations, James. I know that you are retired and living in the great state of Nevada or Nevada, not sure which ones to say. You're a world traveler, that you've been able to visit countries that include those that are able to utilize this program as a path to Safeway. You know, you lived in Japan for 3 years, 20 years ago, so you know how hard it is to restart a life in a new country. And James heard about Welcome.us through a friend in Indiana and thought, much like many of you here tonight, this sounds interesting. James?
Thank you, Kit, and thank you everyone for having me today. I want to begin by talking a little bit about what my motivations were to become a sponsor. When I heard about this program back in December, I was really thrilled because I'm someone who keeps up with the news, and I'm aware of the circumstances on the ground for many ordinary citizens in the countries from which people are eligible for this program. I have been lucky in my life to both travel for work and pleasure, but also in my career, I worked with people who were immigrants to the United States. And many of you know that people around the world are very much the same and have the same goals and objectives. People desperately want to provide for their families, for themselves and their families, first of all. They want to live in a safe and secure environment that hopefully enables them to work and provide for themselves and achieve their maximum potential. They would like for their human and civil rights to be respected by their government. Unfortunately, in the countries for which this program applies, many of these conditions do not exist in those countries for average, normal citizens like you and me. The environment for many people is not safe. Food and medicine are in short supply, not readily available. Governments, in some cases, actively oppress their citizens and intimidate them. So because I'm aware of these circumstances, I really am very interested in helping someone else come to a more positive environment like we have here in the United States. And I was thrilled to hear that this program would enable me to take a more active role and do that. So those are my motivations really in terms of participating in the program, really to help someone come toward a better life for themselves. Because I think what people in these countries who are trying to come to the United States in this legal humanitarian parole program, what they're trying to achieve for themselves is not so different than what my ancestors were trying to achieve when they came to the United States 200 or 300 years ago. And I think many of you on this call tonight, probably maybe some of you are immigrants who came in the not so distant past, but maybe some of you are like me and your ancestors came a long time ago. But what people are seeking is not so different today than it was then either. Moving on to talk a little bit about my experience with the process. As Kit mentioned earlier, there's a lot of information available on the welcome.us website. It's really well organized. They continue to fill it out. I've had a great experience asking the occasional question to my contact at the welcome.us organization. The organization runs a Facebook page for sponsors and potential sponsors, and they monitor that and answer people's questions as they come in. So there's a lot of information on the welcome.us page about resources. I would also like to encourage you, those of you who are thinking about becoming sponsors, to also look around your community. There are organizations and resources designed to help immigrants and those who are newly immigrated to the United States. I live in Las Vegas, for example. Just to give one example, Catholic Social Services is active here in Las Vegas, and they offer a lot of services to newly arrived immigrants in the community. So the resources are out there. It just takes a little bit of effort to locate and find them. Talking about the US government process itself, at the USCIS, the Custom and Immigration Service website, in order to apply to be a sponsor, I did not find the application process to be very difficult. I took a few hours to organize the documents I was required to present for myself as a potential sponsor. Quite a bit of that information is financial in nature. Welcome.us helped me gather the information from the beneficiary that I wish to sponsor, because I needed to add that information into the application process. And then once I have my documents organized, I spent just 2 or 3 hours actually completing the application process online. The USCIS website is pretty well organized. The process of walking you through the I-134 sponsorship application is pretty logical. And I didn't have any difficulty getting through the process. I found it much less onerous than, say, completing a US federal income tax return, which many of us may be working on these days. So I would encourage you not to be intimidated by the process itself, because it's quite logical and not difficult to get through. Once I submitted my application, USCIS did respond within just a few days, and I was approved as a sponsor. To then move to talk a little bit about what my experience has been as a sponsor in the approximate 10 weeks since my beneficiary arrived in the United States. I would say one of the things I emphasized, have continued to emphasize with him, is the importance of communication. I can't read his mind, nor can he read mine. Just to give you a couple of practical examples, when I knew that he was going to arrive in the US in mid-January, I thought to myself, what is going to help me feel and have a greater sense of confidence that this is going to be a successful process for me and him? And I thought, I'm welcoming this person into my home. He's going to be staying with me for quite a while, potentially up to a few months could be up to 2 years for the terms of the humanitarian parole. And I chose to communicate some things in advance that I thought would help the process work for me. For example, I can be a little bit particular about things in my house. I don't wear shoes in the house. I like for them to be taken off just inside the front door. I don't allow cigarette smoking in my house. And I chose to proactively communicate some of those things in advance so that he would know what to expect in terms of, living and being a participant in my home. I also chose to communicate some things that I would help him feel welcome and safe and secure even in advance of his arrival in Las Vegas. For example, I let him know that he would have his own bedroom and bathroom in a part of my home. Those would be his private space, exclusively for his use. I made him understand that he would be given a key to the house and be allowed to come and go as he chooses, just as I do. What else has the experience been like? He has busied himself with studying English, both with an app on his phone and speaking of programs available in the community, he enrolled in a class through the local library system here in Las Vegas. They provide English language instruction for Spanish speakers who wish to improve their English. We are now in the process of waiting for his work visa and his Social Security card to be issued by the government. We're expecting that in the mail anytime now. He is someone who has good skills in the construction trades and has been researching jobs and is eager to get to work and provide for himself once his work visa is here. In terms of daily life together, we usually go to the grocery store together because I want him to feel that he can participate in that process and be sure that he has things in the home that he wants for himself. I shared my Netflix password so he can use that to entertain himself sometimes. He is going out in the city, walking, using the bus system, learning his new city. And all signs are that he's on a path to success and succeed here in the United States. I don't have any doubt about that. It's just going to take a little more time. And I feel really good about my role in enabling and encouraging him to arrive here in the country through this new program offered by the United States government. And I can help him get started. And all of that's going extremely well. And it's just been a really good experience. And I want to say there haven't been any negative surprises at all. So with that, Kit, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Amazing. And thank you so much for giving of your heart and giving of your space to this program. Thanks for showcasing our shared American values, if you will, towards humanitarianism. So really appreciate it. So getting back into the meat of our presentation, we did want to take you guys on a little bit of a tour of our website so you can see where all the resources and supports that I talked about and James referred to are on our website. We're working diligently to develop these tools, consistently updating them with changes to rules or regulations to make sure that we are educating and making people aware about the sponsorship journey. We'll go into our sponsorship hub here. When we do send these PowerPoint slides out, the link to this hub will be live. Once you link towards this hub, you'll see that this is particular to our CHNV populations. You'll see a lot of information and links, both for sponsors and for those that are seeking a path to safety, an opportunity to stay informed through events like this. But really importantly, as you scroll down the page, you'll come to a lot of really great information. I think a good place to start is these sponsorship FAQs. They're pretty brief, but also as comprehensive as we can get them. You'll see them in English and in Spanish here on this website. We've also got them in Haitian Creole. It answers questions such as, how can I find housing? What sort of financial resources do I need to have as a sponsor? What about healthcare? How do I enroll people in health insurance? Or one of my favorite things is reminding folks, as James mentioned, that there's resources within your communities, including public libraries, that offer a lot of services to newcomers. You'll see here that we've got a link to a guide to the I-134A form. Again, that's the application that a sponsor and a beneficiary puts or submits to USCIS to activate the sponsorship process. It's step by step. We broke it down. We tried to make it as easy as possible so that when you go to your application, you've got all the information that you need to be successful. We've also got a number of other guides that include tips for securing housing, how to form a sponsorship group, and importantly, guidance for connecting to local resources, broad for most of the country, and then specific to some areas of the United States through local guides, including in Chicago and Miami, Florida. Now, if your learning style is not reading, but instead your learning style is watching a video and interactive training, we also have put together some short interactive sponsorship trainings, how to get started so you know what you're signing yourself up to, and then a little bit more in detail to help you feel supported and secure in your ability to sponsor and sponsor successfully. One of the tools that Welcome.us has put together to ensure that every American that wants to sponsor can is a tool called Welcome Connect. This is a platform that introduces sponsors and beneficiaries. Again, the purpose of this platform is to ensure that if you don't know somebody seeking safety, just as James didn't, you have the opportunity to meet somebody, have conversations, and determine whether or not sponsorship is right for you. Some of the conversations that we see sponsors and beneficiaries have are conversations that James and his beneficiary had as well. I have a dog. Are you allergic to pets? Do you have children? What sorts of jobs are you looking for? So again, Welcome Connect is our platform that allows sponsors like you and me to learn about and engage with someone seeking safety here in the United States. It's a really powerful tool for many of us to actively engage in sponsorship. All right, and now on to the different benefits that are available to CHNV beneficiaries. Different populations arrived to the United States will have different varying levels of eligibility to public and refugee resettlement benefits. There's a difference here. We've been talking about the CHNV populations at large, and now I'm going to break it up into two categories. One is what benefits and services are available to Cuban and Haitians, and the other, what benefits are available to Nicaraguans and Venezuelans. Cubans and Haitians entering the US on humanitarian parole are eligible to apply for all public benefits and refugee services. So Congress granted this eligibility to these particular populations, Cubans and Haitians, through legislation in previous years. It's really important to recognize that even though Cubans and Haitians are eligible for all these public benefits and for refugee services, it does vary by state and location. So if you think back to those guidance documents that I showed you earlier about connecting with state and local resources, it's really good to peruse those, use those links within the documents, and find out more about what's available in your state. At this time, Congress has not granted eligibility for those entering the United States on humanitarian parole from Nicaragua and Venezuela. So these individuals will be eligible for a much more narrow scope of benefits, but they are eligible for things like healthcare at community healthcare centers, school lunches for the kids, and even Head Start for kids from 3 to 5. So it's just a different set of benefits that folks are eligible for. And again, you'll find that our guides are broken down by these eligibilities to help you understand what folks might be eligible for. But really, really importantly, all individuals that are arriving through the CHNV program, as long as they're of working age, are eligible to apply for work authorization. Currently, this is through an online application, which has sped up the employment authorization process to about 6 weeks. So you'll note that as soon as somebody arrives underneath the CHNV populations, they can apply for work authorization and hopefully find a job and be able to exist on earned income shortly thereafter arrival. I always reflect that when I first moved to where I live now, it took me 4 months to find a job. So I think 6 weeks is quite reasonable for somebody who's new to our country to find their footing and find success. All right, so going through all of this information, let's talk about some of the steps that you can take to mobilize others in this welcoming work. So you came here, you're interested in sponsorship, you've heard about Max, you've heard from James, I've given you lots of information. You can become a sponsor. Again, becoming a sponsor is truly a superpower. If you don't know anybody, you can join the community of sponsors on Welcome Connect. Once you join, you'll be asked to create a profile and you'll be able to join a Facebook group where you can ask sponsors like James and like Max about what their experience has been, tips and tricks about making sure that the sponsorship is successful, and stories to share about connecting with local services. We also know, again, that sponsors might be you, or it might be somebody in your social or professional networks. So spread the word, email your community, and share on social media. If you're interested in sponsorship and you're wanting to do sponsorship as part of a group, this is a great place to start. Tell people in your community that you want to sponsor and you want them to join you in sponsorship. We find that when asked, people want to be helpful and they want to serve. Feel free to use these tools, post them to your social media, to your WhatsApp groups, to whatever you have to communicate with your peers, and find those friends and those colleagues who are willing to join you on this journey. If you're an organization, you can update your website to include information about sponsorship. Again, the more of us that know about this opportunity, the more of us feel comfortable leaning in, and the larger we build a community of sponsors that can help not only welcome more newcomers into the United States, but help build us as a nation of welcomers. We also have the ability for you to sign up to be a welcomer. You know, if you're wanting to stay in touch and you're not quite sure after our presentation today that sponsorship is right for you, we understand. But let's stay in touch. We'd love to share additional resources as they come out to ensure that we're working with you along your journey to discover your superpower as a sponsor. We're coming to the end of our presentation tonight. We won't be able to get to all of your questions during the short time we have together, but we are going to try to answer a couple of them. Quick reminder for those questions that we were unable to answer that are questions about the sponsorship program. We will be answering them as a follow-up, or we'll be making changes to our website to make sure we reflect all of the great questions you have answered here or asked here. All right, let's get started. Oh, this is a great question. So, can someone be a sponsor with a group of people? How are sponsor groups usually formed? Yes. While it's not required, sponsorship experience can be strengthened by working in a group, be it with friends, family, congregation members, or other networks. Maybe it's just people that you meet at a dog park. One person will have to be the lead sponsor on the I-134 application. So just note on the I-134 application, one sponsor, one beneficiary per application. You could sponsor a family, but it's one sponsor, one beneficiary. So if you're sponsoring a family of 5, that would be 5 applications for each sponsor, noting that much of the information would be the same, except for the beneficiary name and personal information from application to application. You could decide in your sponsor group that one person will sponsor for the mother in the family, another person could sponsor for the father in the family, just to sort of share that burden of paperwork, knowing that you as the group are sponsoring a full family to come to the United States. There are many, many reasons to sponsor as part of a group. It can make the work easier. Maybe you're not as lucky as James to be retired and you're still working your 9 to 5. That might mean that working with somebody else or a group of people lightens the load. We do have in that humanitarian parole guide that I showed you earlier on our website, information about how to put in an application as part of a group, acknowledging that you're sharing the burden or sharing the opportunity to sponsor across the different people in your group. Remember, every challenge is an opportunity, and every burden is a chance to become somebody with a superpower. You know, our partner Community Sponsorship Hub also provides resources to help sponsors. So we really suggest, if you're interested in the group model, that you can visit their website, and they have a slightly different sponsorship process that might be attractive to you. Oh, this is another great question, and it is related. Can you sponsor as part of an organization? I love this question because the answer is yes. So again, you as an individual might submit the application as Kit Tainter, but you can remark in your application that you are sponsoring on behalf of an organization. An organization could be a church, it could be an employer, it could be a nonprofit, it could be a whole host of different things. And what this means is that while I am the official sponsor, I'm indicating to USCIS that I have the support of an organization, both financially and through time and effort, to help me be successful in the sponsorship process. Okay, I'm looking at our questions. This is a good question. So, do we have to host beneficiaries in our home? No, there are no requirements to host a beneficiary in your home as a sponsor. But anybody who lives in the United States knows that housing can be a real challenge. It might be a temporary option to host somebody in your home as they get employment authorization, find a job, learn public transportation. That might be right for some sponsor and beneficiary relationships. Other beneficiaries might arrive in the United States and be able to move into an apartment straight away. Maybe this is an apartment that their family or friends are already residing in. In short, while housing is not, offering your house is not a requirement, it's one of those things to discuss if you're on Welcome Connect or you're meeting a potential beneficiary in another modality, to discuss to make sure you have the same set of expectations as your beneficiary as far as housing is concerned. All right, last question. What are some of the sponsors' responsibilities? That's a good question. We went over it a little bit before, but a good reminder that sponsors create the support systems that ensure newcomers can thrive. Some of those responsibilities might be financial. We can assume that many people seeking safety here in the United States, especially from countries like Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, are in a situation in which they no longer have assets to bring to bear to allow them to find housing and stability. So you might need to invest, whether that is yourself, alongside a group of friends, through doing a fundraiser, potentially working through your church, to help people on a path to success here in the United States. You know, sponsorship can be a deep commitment, but a transformational one for both you and those that you welcome. It can be tough. You know, there are benefits and services set up for newcomers here in the United States, remembering that there are different support services dependent on country of origin under the CHNV program. So again, Cubans, they are able to access Medicaid and all the other supports, while Nicaraguans and Venezuelans, depending on their location, might have more of a challenge connecting to those public benefits because of the provisions made by Congress. So again, sponsor responsibilities may differ depending on the needs of the beneficiary, where you live in the United States, what employment opportunities they may have, what you are able to offer as a sponsor, and what your beneficiary is able to offer as well. And sponsorship is a journey. You know, it's different for each and every one of us, but it is truly, truly transformational. Remember, newcomers cannot use this program unless they have a sponsor like you or like James or like myself to make it possible for them to use this pathway. It's truly, truly a privilege to be able to be someone who can provide such direct line to transformation for somebody's life. All right, with that, I think that is most of the questions that we will be able to have tonight, because we want to make sure that we take a moment to thank all of you for joining us. Thanks again for your thoughtful questions. If you didn't get your question answered, and it was a particular question about sponsorship or about the process for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, we look forward to following up with you. We're going to send around a recording of this webinar in English and Spanish. And remember, my ask to you is that you share this with families and friends. You talk about your interest in sponsorship. You talk about the opportunities that sponsorship can provide so that, again, we can maximize these pathways to offer safety and sanctuary for newcomers. We're going to share all the PowerPoint, all of the links. Again, our goal is to make sure we're spreading awareness and education about this program. Many, many thanks to all of the partners that made this possible. We work in an ecosystem. We work with partners on the ground in neighborhoods, partners at the federal level, trying to make us a more welcoming nation. We really appreciate each and every one of them for the tremendous support and work that they do to make us a nation of welcomers. As James mentioned, all of us have an immigration story, or most of us rather have an immigration story to the United States. And it's great to be among friends and colleagues who understand that it's truly immigrants that make our country great. Thanks for joining us today and stepping up to be welcomers. We hope that you've enjoyed this presentation and we've been able to answer a lot of your questions. If we haven't answered your questions, go to our website. There's a lot of information there, and we hope that it is able to help you take the question of, can I be a sponsor, to yes, I will be a sponsor, and move forward with action. Thanks for joining us tonight and have a great evening.